Hello and welcome to the first installment of Pizza and a Football Argument. This is my friend Tye Barrett, and my name is Chad Conine. I'm a sports writer and he's a musician, and we decided we'd talk about Big 12 football every week and throw it up here on wacofork.com. This week we have pizza from Nizza Pizza. Tye, what kind of pizza did you get this week?
Meat Lovers. It's very
Meat Lovers
good.
Pizza, and I got a Supreme.
The crust is actually
pizza.
nice. I'm kind of wondering though if it was smart that we did this while we're supposed to talk and eat at the same time.
That's okay. We'll just have greasy lips. It won't hurt anything.
Well,
And $3.52 for a slice. That's a pretty good price.
not bad.
For a slice of pizza. Well, let's get to our topics that we want to talk about on this football podcast, video podcast, as it were. First, you brought this up, Tye, after Baylor beat Kansas State 35-25 last weekend on the road. First time Baylor ever won at Kansas State. And you wonder, is a win a win? And the implication is that, you know, Baylor didn't run all over Kansas State like they'd beaten their previous opponents this season. So maybe you didn't feel quite as good about this win. But so is a win not just a win?
I'm going to say that no. Although you're never going to say no to a win can mean something. I think, you know, coming off of Baylor's, the score actually doesn't reflect how close that game was. And
yeah, if Ahmad Dixon doesn't make that interception, Kansas State might drive down, score a touchdown with no time left and win the game.
Yeah, or at least field goal to tie it, you know, who knows.
Right.
And so a win is not a win in that, sure, Baylor won the game, but they lost in so many other ways that I think momentum on the season that Baylor had going for them totally just stopped. They're going to have to work to build the momentum that carries from game to game back up.
Sure. I see what you're saying. I disagree with you. So we could officially call this Pizza and a Football Argument because we're having a football argument now. You know, I reflect on the 2008 Texas Tech football team, which is the only position I've ever been in where I was, you know, a follower of a team that was undefeated 10 games into the year. That's the only time it's ever happened.
Only time Texas Tech's have been good.
Right. Well, if you want to say that, fine, say that. But they were undefeated 10 games into the year, and they got smashed by Oklahoma. You know, and in the course of that year, there were some games that they muddled through. They, you know, just squeaked by a mediocre Texas A&M team. You know, and I don't remember even the scores of the games. I just remember they muddled through some games, but it doesn't matter. The only three games that mattered to me in that season were beating Texas with a touchdown in the final minute, and that was when I think Texas was number 1 and Texas Tech was number 3, and then smashing Oklahoma State and then getting smashed by Oklahoma. And so those are the games that matter. Those are the ones that stick out in your memory. A year from now, if Baylor goes 13-0 and wins the national championship, or they go 11-2 and win the Cotton Bowl, you know, or lose the Cotton Bowl or whatever, you're not going to be thinking about the Kansas State game. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is they went to Manhattan, Kansas, and won for the first time. It doesn't matter by how many points. And it's actually good that they had a game where they faced some adversity and still won, because you don't want to get into a game with Oklahoma or Texas Tech and not had the lead in a game all year.
Sure.
Okay. Next question. Since we were talking about Texas Tech and Baylor, and I've got to think this is the first time in the history of ever that Baylor and Texas Tech have been the top 2 ranked teams in a conference that they were playing football in.
Yeah, it may actually be the first time they've ever both been ranked at the same time.
I can't think of another time they've both been ranked at the same time. I want to ask you though, I mean, there's no doubt Oklahoma and Texas have looked at the rankings and they realized that the little brothers, Baylor and Texas Tech, are ranked ahead of them, and that probably gets under their skin a little bit.
Sure. So
let's look forward. Let's try to look into our crystal ball and see the end of the season. And how would you rank those 4 teams at the end of the season? Where do you think they'll be?
Being the loyal Baylor Bear that I am, I'm just going to have to say that the Bears are going to be on top, and I think that the Raiders are going to fall. Very reactionarily speaking, I think that Texas did such a good job this weekend against OU that I'm probably going to put them at my number 2. I think that they will be Baylor's biggest challenge of the season, and I think that when the Longhorns come to Floyd Casey at the end of the season, that's going to be the game that decides who ultimately wins the Big 12.
I think we agreed on that one. Did we put them in the exact same order?
That might actually be an agreement. So.
Well, that probably means we're both wrong.
Hey, but you know,
Big 12 week.
But yeah, I do think the Big 12 is pretty weak this year. part of the reason I say that is, as a Baylor fan, I'm trained to believe that if the Bears are on top, then something
And everybody else must be bad.
something has to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I do think that Baylor is better than they've ever been before. But at this point, it feels like some of the guys you expect to be right there alongside of them really aren't. And so rather than it being a race for who's the best, right now I feel like Baylor is firmly on top. I think you can make an argument that Texas Tech is firmly on top. But when your programs like Texas and OU are struggling, and I don't know if we can say OU struggling, they lost to Texas, but that it's
They did
it's
beat
gotta be a
Notre
week.
Dame, so they got that going for them.
They did beat Notre Dame. And
It was the conference's lone shining moment in non-conference play.
That's true.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you here on this point.
Yeah.
One thing about Baylor that you cannot compare Baylor to anything that Baylor was prior to 2008, because those teams didn't have players like Cyril Richardson and Anton Goodley and Bryce Petty and Ahmad Dixon and guys like that. They didn't have those type of playmakers, and they do now. And from player 1 to player 36 or 37 or how many they use in a typical game, they look a whole lot more like Texas and Oklahoma than they used to. And you look at Texas Tech, and Tommy Tuberville was there for 3 years, and it was kind of an uncomfortable marriage, right? But the one thing that he did is he brought in a lot of guys who know how to play defense, and so Texas Tech is playing a little bit of defense. In fact, I think they're the only team in the nation ranked in the top 25 in both offense and defense at this point of the season. And Texas and Oklahoma, I mean, we saw Saturday the rumors of Texas' demise have been greatly exaggerated. They showed up and beat Oklahoma, and they're going to show up and beat up a whole lot more people. I mean, they beat Kansas State and Austin when it looked like that they were vulnerable, that they were ripe for the taking. And Kansas State, ran the ball for I think 327 yards against Baylor the other day, and that was supposed to be Texas' big gaping holes in their rush defense. Well, they show up and don't really have that much of a chance to win the game in the fourth quarter against Texas. So Texas is going to be right there. They're going to go to a bowl game, and it's probably going to be a pretty good bowl game at the end of the year. And their win count is probably going to be 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 after the bowl game, maybe even.
I guess, yeah.
And then people are going to scratch their heads, and they're going to say, well, do we want to keep Mac or do we not want to keep Mac? And then it's just, they're going to keep Mac, and this time next year they've lost a game or two.
That's a whole other argument.
Right,
that's
okay.
a whole other argument.
You're right. But what I'm saying is Texas isn't the walkover that everybody has thought just because they lost a couple of non-conference games. Oklahoma, like I said, they beat Notre Dame. TCU played a pretty good game against LSU, and you asked me earlier what that game, TCU's lost to LSU, what that meant about TCU, and all I think that means about TCU is they weren't good enough to beat LSU, and just like they weren't good enough to beat Texas Tech and Oklahoma. I think TCU is still a pretty good program. They're a strong program, but I don't think they can swing for very long with LSU and Oklahoma and Texas Tech and Baylor. Now, as soon as I say that, they'll turn around and they'll end up winning 8 games too this year.
Sure.
Now, I don't know how I can say every team in the conference is going to win 8 or 9 games, but maybe
same way that
if Kansas plays like 30
63
games,
points.
then every other team in the conference can win 8 or 9 or 10.
That's great. I actually might put Kansas up in the top this year, just if we want to keep poking fun of them.
You might put them in what? You might throw them into that top 4?
Sure.
Yeah, they're going to have the biggest turnaround ever.
Hey, Charlie Weiss, I believe it.
Absolutely. Well, that's all for Pizza and a Football Argument this week.
Yeah, just in case there was an inconspicuous lack of pizza during the filming of that segment, I want to say it is still here.
Yes. Well, I guess full disclosure, we did one take, an $8 pizza, and then realized the camera didn't record, so we had to do another take.
It was the first one. We're amateurs. Get over it.
Right. But Pizza, pizza, good stuff. Big 12 football, good stuff too.
Amen.
Goodbye.